Hi, so this is the second part in the series about the Leopard chat UI, and we're going to cover the initial setup. So effectively how to get hold of the code from GitHub, how to clone the repo, build it and get it running in a kind of a development mode, if you like. We won't really touch on how to configure the solution or the build variables, etc. just yet, but that will be covered in a sort of subsequent video. All right, just head over to the GitHub page, head over to the clone button over here, copy the URL. Okay, to get this working, you're going to need Git installed on your system. So go to Git's source controls website, download it beforehand if you don't already have that. Again, you're going to need to have Node.js installed on your computer for it to compile and run. Again, you can download it from here for your operating system. If you're on Windows or Linux or otherwise, you can also download a Node version manager for your respective operating system if you want to swap between Node versions quite regularly. I typically run with a Node version manager here that allows me to update the version of Node quite quickly, or to change it so I can test different versions. Okay, a lot of what we covered here as well is also in the documentation. There's a kind of checklist, and it'll run you through the same tasks that I'm kind of explaining today. But what we're going to do is, obviously, before we get started, is install those dependencies. I won't go through those steps here, but I will pick up where we have to clone Leopard and build everything. So, okay. So now that we have the website here, we've copied that particular URL. Open your terminal of choice and navigate to a directory where you want to store the final cloned repo. Okay, so I have mine open up to a specific folder where I keep all my code, and I'm just going to type git clone and the URL. Just by itself, when you don't add anything to enter that URL, it's going to put it into a folder, just before the whatever comes before the .git, and so we can cd into Leopard, chat UI. Okay, and you have Visual Studio Code. You can open that up for editing now. So we just do code. And we'll pull that over from the other monitor. Okay, so that's everything in here. Now you can do this from your terminal as well, but you could just as well do it in here. So the first thing you need to do is, obviously, this whole project, if you like, is based on Node.js, and it requires a number of dependencies, and those dependencies are always defined in the package.json. And so there's a fair amount of dependencies used here. Some of them are dev dependencies, and some of them are kind of used out in kind of final build. Okay, but to install those, we just have to install them with an npm install. Now this is going to take a varied amount of time depending on your operating system and your CPU and memory, but I'll come back as soon as this is installed. Okay, back, and that's finished. Now, obviously, at the end of that kind of install of dependencies, you will have a kind of node modules folder built with all the various dependencies that were required. Now, just to start everything, we can run npm run serve. And again, this also will take a varied amount of time depending on your system, but effectively taking a snapshot of the configuration and running it in a environment which can be considered a dev environment. So you'll have everything running locally on port 8080, and you can test, amend, or just play with Leopard without it being in a production sense by doing this. Obviously, there's another step later on in the series where we'll cover building it for production, and the final outcome of that is to produce HTML, CSS, JavaScript in an output folder, which you can then just copy over to your web server, and then easily hook up that web chat client to any web page by including a little bit of JavaScript on the app. So I'll just pause for a second. Okay, now, well, once it's finished, obviously I'll let you know where it's being served from. It's obviously being served from localhost port 8080. You can control click to follow and open that up, but as it's currently configured, the code will fire up your default browser and take you to the website, which has the chat widget embedded. I should note that for Windows users, if the build step gives you, rather the installation of the dependencies gives you problems, or the starting of the solution gives you a problem, you might want to head over to the documentation. You might need to install some Windows build tools that will allow you to compile some certain modules that are native to Windows. So install this, run this before maybe the npm install initially, so that you have these globally within your operating system.